We are kind of in a little bit over time, but I think it's really important that we kind of make the space to actually have our graduate panelists available. So it would be great if we can actually have the graduate panelists kind of show their faces, turn their videos on. Thank you guys so much for joining. It's so nice. There's so many different familiar faces. So kind of to kick off, I'll just go in the order that I have on my video screen. Can you guys just give yourself a quick introduction, kind of, what you're doing, where you are, and then we can kind of go through the different questions and we'll open it up to the audience. So I'll start with Chris.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Clark. I'm a third-year PhD student in Dr. Smith's lab. I'm currently located about 30 feet from him. He's over there at the University of California, Irvine. And I study stem cell differentiation towards endoderm and its mechanical influences.
Thank you. Calixto.
Hello, everyone. My name is Calixto or Calix. I am a fifth-year PhD student in molecular engineering at the University of Chicago. And I'm focusing on immunoengineering, and I work on memory T-cell development for vaccines and cancer vaccines.
Awesome. Hannah.
Hey everyone, I'm Hannah. I'm a sixth and final year PhD student at the University of Colorado Medical Campus. My PhD is in developmental biology, and my thesis is focusing on how the blood vessels develop in the brain.
And finally, Rayanne.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rayanne. I'm a third year PhD student in bioengineering at UC San Diego. My lab focuses on basically how sex differences drive cardiovascular disease in males and females, and we use phototunable hydrogels to do different kind of biological evaluations.
Great. So maybe we could go in reverse. So I'll start with the first question. So what motivated you to pursue a PhD, graduate or going to graduate school, and why did you decide this particular field of study?
Cool. I guess I'll start. So after undergrad, I wasn't really sure that I had wanted to pursue research, at least at the capacity of a PhD. So I worked with a postdoc in my undergrad, and I hadn't really understood what life as like a graduate student would have looked like. So instead I pursued a master's, and then with that I had kind of fallen in love with research and actually, being able to take have like independence and kind of execute like a research idea. So that was super exciting for me and kind of motivated me to actually pursue the PhD. It definitely taught me a lot of skills that I feel like help me excel in my program right now. And in terms of deciding the field of study, I had always had a very strong interest in cardiovascular disease. My undergrad research was looking at like vascular thrombosis. In my master's, I was looking at the influence of diabetes on cardiovascular disease. So I definitely did want to carry out that theme in my PhD as well, just given the wide potential for impact. So those were definitely many motivating factors, but ultimately I had received some really great advice from my PI at my master's institution, as well as other graduate students that I had known to really, ensure that the mentor that I select for my PhD is going to be supportive and kind of understanding of those things like work-life balances and managing everything that comes with graduate school, because there's so much to this degree aside from your research. And I think having that kind of understanding and that advice really did make me a bit more selective about where I wanted to go, to make sure that I had actually asked those questions at these recruitment events. And I felt like UCSD and my PI, Brian Aguado, is kind of a good fit for all of that.
Hannah?
Yeah, I was like, I think I'm next. Yeah. So I started out doing undergrad research in my undergrad. I had an awesome mentor. That was Quentin. And I was initially pre-med. I was thinking about going to medical school, but I really just fell in love with doing the process of science. I really liked working in the lab. That feeling that you get when you're doing an experiment and you get the results and you're like the only one in the world who's observing something for the first time. That was just awesome. And then this also, the aspect of being in lab and getting to be creative with your science. I really just love that. And then I realized that I could make a career out of that. So that was excellent. Part of it also was knowing you could go to get a PhD and get paid to do further education. So how I wound up in my field of study. So my journey is a little bit circuitous. So I was working with Quentin as an undergrad doing stem cell biology. So I knew I really liked blood vessels. I really liked stem cells. I applied to a lot of different grad programs really broadly. And when I got there, I had the opportunity to do rotations. So I recommend this to anyone who's going into a grad program that offers rotations. So I took that as an opportunity to try out a bunch of different labs, different model systems. So I rotated through using Tetrahymena, which is a little single-celled organism, and mouse models, as well as organoid models. And I eventually wound up in my field because I loved the lab and the mentor that I was working with, which is Julie Siegenthaler. So that's how I wound up in my current field. But mentor choice and getting to try out different things was really, really important and influential to that decision.
I like so, yeah.
So wait, what was the question again? I completely forgot.
So like, why'd you pursue a PhD, and how did you
All right.
decide on your field of study?
Amazing. Sorry about that. So I think how I wound up getting into a PhD program was, again, in undergrad, like a lot of people mentioned, I was doing research under Bria, actually, which was an amazing experience. And I really fell in love with just the process of doing research. I always thought that I wanted to be a scientist, but in a similar way as Hannah, I started as pre-med, thinking that that was going to be the best way for me to be able to do some form of science, not really knowing that I could do research, I guess, as a job. So that really just opened it up to me doing what I'm doing right now. And I also enjoyed a lot in undergrad doing mentorship. I was involved in a lot of like mentoring programs. And then academia then seemed like a really good fit for me because I really like research and mentoring people. So that really kind of like opened me up to this career, which I've enjoyed. I mean, I do a lot of, I continue doing a lot of mentorship here, aside from the research, which I think it's what I truly enjoy the most is working with other people in creating the science. And just collaborating and stuff is what really kind of drives me. Aside from the science, I think it's just the working in a team. I really enjoy doing that with other scientists that are very just, conversations that you have with people are just incredible, like really deep, really amazing. You go from a cell to, I don't know what it is to be alive and stuff, which I really enjoy. I mean, you can it really just expands your horizon. And it was really all due to my undergraduate experience in research. I think that the lab that we were working in, I met Hannah and Ryan there. So it was just a great environment that really fostered my wanting to pursue a PhD in bioengineering. And how I ended up in immunoengineering specifically, it was I think immunoengineering right now is kind of like becoming more popular. But when I was first applying to PhD programs, there were very limited number of immunoengineering degrees. And I really started falling in love with the immunology in my senior year in undergrad. Just in like a random class, we learned how Humira worked. And I thought that was really interesting, just how the immune system overall impacts your entire body. Of course, not only fighting disease, but in terms of like autoimmunity and stuff. So yeah, I really wanted to kind of like combine this interest in immunology with the previous work that I was doing in vascular biology. So I ended up in the lab that I currently work in. It's a lymphatics lab, so it's still in the vascular biology realm, but looking at the interaction between the lymphatic vessels and immunity and how they interact in an adaptive immune response. It was just kind of like the combination of all of my interests, and I was lucky enough to be able to find a lab that was able to combine all of it.
Hi. So I was never the best academic person, just in general, but I did realize very early on in my undergraduate studies that I was really good at teaching and mentoring other students. So the classes that I did do well in, I became a teaching assistant or grading assistant or learning assistant for various classes, and I would mentor dozens of students at a time, which was fantastic. And then I got into undergrad research. The first lab was someone's got to do the research, but it's not going to be me. It was studying how you can use octanol-based acids to degrade paper to make sugars, which was kind of interesting, but not really my cup of tea. So I then studied bacterial enzymology and had a great time there studying how you could use enzymes to destroy nicotine addictions and improve reaction potentials, which was still kind of interesting, but I wanted to get more of the human side. So in grad school, I decided to look for any bioengineering applications for human-derived cells that might seem interesting. Stem cells seemed like a great application. So I chose my lab based on the rotations that I had, and I had a great time with it. How do you decide you feel to study? I like human cell biology.
Great. So back at you, Chris, and then we'll go back around. So what are some essential skills or qualities do you believe are beneficial to be successful in graduate school? And how do you develop or acquire them?
Everything fails. Every experiment fails at least once, or it's not worth doing. So getting very used to accepting that in your undergrad, you had someone above you, a mentor, that was there to help you figure out what went wrong, why it went wrong, and how to improve it. As the PhD student, it's important to realize that the things that you do will fail. You will waste some of your time, and you need to get past that. And the only way to learn that skill is to have it happen over and over and over and over again, soul crushingly. But the acceptance of being able to look at a project and say, that failed, I'm not sure why, but that's science, and then move on is the most important skill. Other beneficial skills, learning to just like not bother about other people making silly mistakes. If someone leaves a pipette tip box out, you could make a fuss about it. You could also just not, which is something that I came into grad school not knowing, and I very much gained later on. And it is definitely beneficial just for like good relationships. Things might get on your peeve, things might peeve you, but just ignore them and move on with your life. It doesn't really matter. I pass it off to you.
Cool. So I 100% agree with all of those. Skills are so needed. I think that for me also, I think having good communication skills is really important, both in terms of I mean, science communication, when you're communicating your research out into the community, out into the scientific community and the non-scientific community as well. And then also communication just with your lab mates and your PI and your advisor is super important. I think just having like a meeting when you're talking about like what are the expectations, like what are the goals that we have to achieve is really important. Just kind of like having an open communication with your advisor and your lab members is really important to me. I would consider that to be one of the most important, just general communication. And then, like I mentioned before, just like teamwork and collaboration. I think that nowadays, especially, like most of science is done in a team. Like you don't really see papers of just one or two authors anymore. It's a big group of people that are doing the research together. So communication also kind of like plays into that. You have to be an active communicator and an active team member, because you're really not going to be doing you will be doing a lot of things alone, but not all of the things you're going to be doing alone, and a lot of it is going to be in a team. So it is crucial to develop some teamwork skills. I know that a lot of people maybe don't like working in a team in like undergrad classes and stuff, but it is totally different, an undergrad class versus working in a lab. The collaboration is way different and it feels better, in my opinion. And then also just a lot of kind of like self-motivation. This is really important. I think the milestones can be a little blurry in a PhD program, depending on the program. So just kind of like having like your personal goal of what you want to achieve is important. in terms of just like academics and career-wise, but also personal, like what are the things that you want to learn as well and get out of your program, and keep that at the kind of like forefront, because sometimes like the PhD journey is not linear. It just goes in waves. So just kind of like keeping that ultimate goal in mind, I think, is really important as well.
Yeah, I totally echo what Chris and Calix said. Yeah, when you fail, and you will fail a lot, learning how to take those opportunities and see them as learning opportunities, move on, and adapt from it is super important. And then also communication at the written, oral, and interpersonal level, I think, have been completely essential to practice. I'll add to this by saying a couple of things. I think organization and time management, those skills are critical to establish starting out. I think in the literal sense, like keeping a good lab notebook, keeping your data managed properly, those are the things that will help you out. I've heard this said before, and this is definitely true for me. Doing a PhD is like doing a group project with past versions of yourself. And year 2, Hannah, was not the most organized. So when I was putting together my manuscript, things were a little murky. So you'll save yourself a lot of time and anxiety establishing good habits beforehand. So I had to learn that the hard way. I hope you don't have to learn that the hard way. And then also kind of building on that, knowing when and how to reach out for help, whether it's a technique that you don't know, or you just need support in a certain moment from lab mates or from your PI. Knowing when those moments are is I think really critical. Just be open and put yourself out there and be eager to learn in those ways. I think those are really good qualities to have.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything that's been said so far. Especially bouncing off what Hannah just said about, not being afraid to ask for help. I think that's something that I especially struggled with. Just when you are in a place where you don't see a lot of people that look like you, you're kind of put this expectation on yourself to fulfill every single expectation and perform to 100% all the time. But that's just not possible. We're human, we're not robots. So I think being able to recognize when you do need to ask for help is a quality that's going to benefit you not only during your PhD but also afterwards as well. And also you can consider like where your lab is situated too, if it's next to a lot of other labs, if you're in a research consortium. There's a lot of experts in a lot of really different areas. Like our lab is right next to a lab that does cancer biology. They have their Western blots down, to the T. So we know who to ask when we wanted to get that kind of going. So just those sorts of things too, that kind of just come with time as well. And I'll also say to be good about like your communication strategies. I know Calix talked about this as well. You can also be proactive about whether your institution has like research communication programs. Sometimes they're like formal certifications, or they're just workshops that might be held over the summer. I would say maybe try to look into whether like your business school at your institution offers it or something. They're really open to people from other backgrounds, not just, that business social science area, to kind of partake in those programs. And then also time management. As unfortunate as it is, it's not something that you can kind of gain overnight. It definitely comes with time, because I think at different stages of your PhD, you might have different time management strategies. And I know just for myself, I've adapted so much from when I was in my master's program to when I was in my first year taking classes and TAing, to being full-time research now, and still dealing with some other responsibilities. So it's definitely a work in progress, but I think ultimately, you should recognize your limits and kind of be intentional about communicating them with your PI as well. And that's where, those conversations about expectations and whatnot kind of come into play, because your life as a graduate student is very holistic. It's not just your research. There's so much else that's going on around it. So I think it's important to kind of take advantage of all of that too.
I mean, this is phenomenal, and I actually wish I had this type of interaction when I was applying to graduate school. So I'm like, the tips and tricks that you guys have given is incredible. So I'm going to ask, kind of 2 questions that are kind of coupled. So how do you guys maintain like a healthy work-life balance? And, I know there's a lot of pressure in graduate school, right? So like, how do you cope with the stress, or what do you tell yourself to have that motivation when experiments are failing, or like, how do you navigate that? So work-life balance, and how do you really manage the pressure and stress? Right, yeah, I'll go back
Are
to
we
you.
going backwards again? Okay, cool. Gotcha. Yeah, so work-life balance, I think again, this is something that kind of should be considered before you even join a lab and before you join an institution, honestly. At like your recruitment events, you should talk to all of these PIs about their work-life balance and what those expectations are. Talk to the lab members especially because they're the ones that are living through that. And can kind of give you a better, realistic idea of what that looks like. And I also would say it's really important to have a grounding activity, whether that's, like a set number of hours a day to like do reading, to do like a morning or an evening walk, working out, taking advantage of, recreation activities and stuff like that. I think that has been essential for me, especially like our gym at UCSD is right next to my lab. So my friend and I, we carpool in the morning, we go to the gym, then get to lab, have like a super early start. But it's like, I feel like it's increased my productivity so much to just kind of have that as like a consistent routine. So that's been really nice. And in terms of, dealing with, field experiments and stuff like that, I would say kind of it's important to also be forgiving with yourself too, like especially if you are in a routine, like let's say you are just, really exhausted mentally and physically one evening, if you need an hour or two to sleep in or something, or just kind of rest a bit to make sure that your energy levels are up and where they need to be. I think that has also been super essential to making sure that, burnout isn't something that happens, because the amount of time that it takes to recover from burning out is far more than the amount of time it takes to reach that burnout stage. So always keep that in consideration too.
Yeah, I will definitely echo that. Maintaining your hobbies and having those times outside of lab for yourself, that's incredibly important. Going to grad school does not mean you have to give up all of your free time. You'll be very, very busy, but it's so, so important. Like your health, your mental health, your physical health comes above really, really anything. I'll add also saying boundaries are your friend, setting your boundaries with your work, like both personally and then also communicating with your PI, with your mentors about, here's when I'm going to be in lab. I'm a morning person, so I try to get in early and I get out early. I don't work Saturdays if I can help it. And establishing those early on in your PhD are super important. Recognize when you are overextending yourself, and give yourself the time and grace to, to recover from that, to take care of yourself. I overheard some of Bria's talk earlier, and the power of no is incredibly important. I'm someone who tends to say yes to too many things, and I had to learn, again, learning the hard way in a lot of ways, saying no to things. You simply cannot do all of the things. You have to say no to some things. I think a lot of my most big failures in lab have occurred when I am overextending myself. And failures are things that happen. And I think you get better at dealing with them over time. But the way I manage failure now is I try not to fail by taking care of myself. So yeah, all of those things. Do not disturb is my best friend also.
Great. So I really do want to echo what Hannah said about boundaries. I think boundaries are so important. Setting them with your lab mates, with your PI, with your advisor, with yourself is really important. For example, like I don't do any work at home. Like as soon as I step in my house, I don't do any work. Which, I know that some people like to work in their home and do data analysis and stuff, but if I ever have to do something outside of lab, I go to a coffee shop or I go to the library. I really try not to do anything when I'm at home, just to have that as my space where it's just me and like just me. So that is really really important to me. I was going to talk about that as well, so really want to echo that. Again, I think that just communicating with your PI is really important. Being able to set expectations, set up goals, have like clear expectations of what they expect of you and what you expect of them. I think it's important because they are, at the end of the day, your mentor as well. So I think that's really important. And then in order like to relieve stress and stuff, I think what Ryan said, going to the gym, going hiking, going out into nature is really important, if that's something that you're interested in, or find a hobby that you really like. I know there's so many people in my program specifically that love to crochet, and they have like fiber craft circles, and and I think crocheting is probably like a really common hobby in grad school. I remember Bria crocheting in when I was in undergrad. So yeah, find a hobby that you like, that you enjoy doing, just to spend an hour, 2 hours a day on that for yourself. It's really important. And then try to develop a support network, either inside of your lab, outside of your lab, that being friends, other coworkers, just someone that you can vent to, or you know, vent to each other, or just chat. And there's a lot of at least in my institution, there's a lot of student organizations that have like coffee chats and that kind of stuff, where they just kind of like bring coffee and donuts, and you can just like chat with other grad students about your life, what's going on, which is, I think it's really powerful to just kind of like talk to other grad students, trying not to shut yourself in, because that can happen. And then just try to, which I know it's really hard, but try to like detach your self-worth and your like scientific worth from your results. Sometimes it's difficult, but sometimes science doesn't science, and that's okay. It's not your fault. It's just how the world is. Your hypothesis was wrong, and that's okay. So yeah, I think that that's really important. That's what a postdoc in my lab told me as soon as I got in, and that has really helped me throughout my PhD. Because yeah, sometimes you repeat your experiments and they're like not working, and you have to learn from that, see what's going on. And sometimes, yeah, your hypothesis was wrong, and that's fine. That is totally okay.
So yeah, start out with absolute crocheting. This is a little shark that I finished like 2 weeks ago. I named him Billy. I personally do prefer the work myself a ton to get a lot of data and then take a few days off mentality. So I always have 3 projects going simultaneously, and they're at various stages. So it's always a lot of work. I know I personally do work Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I even worked on my birthday last year. But that's just what I want to do with my PhD. I realize that most of the graduate students in my lab, they don't want to do that, and they don't have to, they don't need to do that. It's completely individual, the amount of work you want to put in for the amount of results you want to get out. And the important thing is just staying below the level of everything failing, because learning in academia is a lot like working out a muscle group. If you work out and you strain yourself a little bit, then you're going to get stronger. If you break your arm, you're not going to be a lot stronger. So knowing your limits is an important thing to learn. I learned that a lot my first year. And then being able to do as much as you want. And most experiments, bio is a little bit harder, but most experiments, you can find a stopping point and then just give it a day. Don't do anything with it and come back to it. Cell work, you of course need to change media every day. Maybe have someone do that for you. Maybe try and stagger it so you can just take a day off. Hello. Well, darn. This one's with Smith. Huh. Okay, Smith, I'm gonna end this so we can figure out what to do with the postdoc.
All right. Thank you, Chris. So for the last 10 minutes, I have, I think, another question, and then we can kind of wrap it up and go to our break. And thank you again so much. So looking back, what do you wish you knew once you started graduate school? And what's like the best piece of advice that you can give to new students entering? So maybe Calixto, you can start.
Oh, that's a good question. It's a tough question. I wish I knew many things before I started grad school. I think that one of the most important parts is that, for me at least, is to realize that grad school is also like a huge growth period for you. I feel like you think that you like finish growing in undergrad, you know, and that is not the case. Like, especially for me, I mean, being in grad school during the pandemic was kind of horrible, but you know, we learned and we survived. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a huge time for growth. both personally, emotionally, career-wise, academically. So just kind of like realizing that, and that it's I think I said this before, but that it's not a linear journey. It's going to be a lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of sides to side. It really just kind of like takes you everywhere, but that's kind of like the fun of it as well. It's a really fun time, a really good journey. But just kind of like keeping I don't know, like mental health resources also like in mind. I think for me, it was really important to just kind of like have a therapist throughout. Like as soon as I got into grad school, I decided to find a therapist through student counseling, just because I knew that grad school was going to be like a tough time period just in general. So I think just kind of like jumping on that more in a like a prophylactic kind of way, it's really helpful for all of grad students. And yeah, I think that's I think that's what I wish I had known. I mean, what else? I feel like there's so many things. If you have you know, like it depends on your program, but if you have the ability to rotate, Hannah said this before, like do the rotations. You might think that you are already set on someone that you're like super interested in working with, but once you get to the school, like there's just so many cool labs that are doing amazing research that just allow yourself, even if you already know that you're going to be working with X, Y, or Z, just allow yourself to participate in those rotations and like fully delve into the science and the research that's done by the other professors, because it can also lead to collaborations and stuff that's not necessarily the lab that you're going to be joining. But I think it's really important to just broaden your horizons and see what what other labs are around. There are no rotations in my program, and I wish that there were. You just kind of like shadow around randomly. And I knew that I wanted to work with my advisor, and I did my kind of like summer rotation. And not that I regret being in my lab. I love my lab, and I wouldn't choose any other lab if I'm being honest. But I do wish that I had rotated a little more. Just to get to see what other people are doing and set up collaborations like that. So I think it's really important to just expand your horizons in that way as well.
I can chime in here next. Yeah, I think everything that Calix said is totally something I resonate with as well. I'd say to myself 6 years, 6 years ago, it's been so long. I am definitely not the person now that I was when I entered grad school. Like my personal priorities, my like where I want to go in life, what sort of science I want to be doing is completely different than the expectations that I had coming in. So yeah, keep an open mind and be really flexible. I say be like a sponge coming in. Absorb as much knowledge as you can, seek out as many opportunities as you can. I found that going to as many seminars and journal clubs and courses and workshops, like even remotely related to what I'm interested in, like, oh, that sounds cool, I'm going to go to that. That has helped so much guide my interests in so many unexpected ways. If you get a chance to do any sort of workshop or advanced training course, I highly recommend that. I did a course with the Marine Biological Lab, and that has like fundamentally changed me as a person. The European MBL has a couple courses like that. Talk to other students and your advisors to kind of seek out those opportunities. But yeah, like I said, just take it all in as much as you can. It's surprisingly, like reflecting now, it's like it goes by so quickly, and you only have like a couple of years to really take it all in. But yeah, it will change you. You'll do so much growing during the 5 or 6 years that you're in grad school. It's really the most exciting time.
Rayanne or Chris?
Sure. Yeah, I again echo everything that Calix and Hannah said, especially about being open to everything, because you never really know where these opportunities might lead you to. I had expressed some interest in a potential career in like patent law or regulatory affairs. And before I knew it, I was connected with people in that field in San Diego. And it was really nice to be able to kind of network with them, but then also host an event and expose other students and undergrads to this potential career path and how a PhD can kind of help get them there. And I'd also say that conferences are really great, and they're incredible ways to not only network with faculty, but also with other graduate students. I remember at the Society for Biomaterials, I met so many other biomaterials PhD students at all of these institutions across the country, and some international as well too. And it's really cool to kind of just, network with potential future peers, as they finish their graduate programs and end up in their different career paths too. And again, with communicating your research ideas and interests to your PI, I think this is super important. Again, this is something that might happen before you, begin in the lab or while you're in the lab too. If you express interest in learning more about a certain technique, your PI might have collaborations that are either ongoing or maybe they have an idea to start a collaboration, and that could be really great potential like professional development opportunity for you as well to get maybe technical grant writing skills, and if you want to help contribute to that too. So there's lots of opportunities too. I would say, like, overall in grad school, just don't hold back. Of course, recognize your limits, but in the end, I think grad school is going to be what you make of it, and you have to be the one that is kind of taking the steps to actually, advance that and put yourself out there.
I'm going to go back to something I believe Hannah said, and my number one suggestion would just be data organization. Make sure you know where every single file is from day one, because going back to my rotation, it's a rat's nest. I can find stuff, don't worry, Dr. Smith, but it's not fun to do so. So I've definitely improved throughout year 2 and a lot of year 1 to really know my exact file system. And coming in, I would have just asked anyone in the lab, how exactly do you organize your files, and just mimic them if they, or take any suggestions that they have, because it is horrible to find out like a year and a half in, 2 years in, I can't find something from my second month in lab that I really need. So that's probably my biggest thing, just keeping everything organized to make your life easier later on. And I believe that takes us to time.
Yes. I just want to, send out a huge thank you to all of our panelists. I mean, this has been incredible. I appreciate the time that you took out, and the advice, just seeing you guys grow and mature from first meeting you as undergraduate students and seeing you now as PhD students is just like a little overwhelming. I'm so proud of all of you. And I think the advice that you gave, like I took notes. Like there's definitely things that you spoke to me about that resonated with me as well. So I really, really appreciate the time. So we're going to take a break now for the next 30 minutes. So we'll kick back at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, and then we'll kind of wrap up with our second class of presentations, and then we'll have faculty presentations, and then we'll kind of close. So thank you again for everyone for joining for this session, and looking forward to seeing you guys soon.
Yes, it was so good to see all of our panelists. They all kind of mentioned it, but they all are former Grad. Well, other than Chris, but Chris works for Quentin actively, but the other 3 are former Grad Lab undergrads. So seeing where you guys are now is like amazing. It makes me feel old. But yeah, we'll see you all at 11:30.